The wind, carrying the scent of salt and decay, struck the face of every man who stood on the edge of the battlefield. There were no birds to be heard, only the sounds of swords clashing, shields breaking, and the groans of soldiers, both living and dying. The sky was dark, with storm clouds gathering above, and the very earth beneath their feet seemed to tremble with anticipation. The battle that was about to unfold would change the fate of an entire nation. It was the year 1066, a time when kingdoms were forged in blood and battles were fought not just for land, but for survival. The Viking king Harald Hardrada, known as the Last Viking, stood tall among his warriors. His life had been a series of victories, his name whispered with reverence and fear across the known world. He had already carved his legacy through the icy lands of Norway, and now he set his eyes on England, where riches and glory awaited. With his fleet and army assembled, Hardrada advanced toward the heart of England. His Viking warriors, hardened by years of raiding and conquest, were eager for battle. They moved across the North Sea with determination, their long ships cutting through the water like sharp blades. Soon they reached the land of the Anglo-Saxons, a people ruled by King Harold II. But the Anglo-Saxons were not unprepared. King Harold, though young and relatively untested, had proven himself as a capable leader, and he would not surrender England to the Vikings without a fight. The stage was set for a battle unlike any before. Both sides knew that whoever emerged victorious would rule England. The wind was heavy with the promise of war. It all came to a head at Stamford Bridge. The narrow crossing over the River Derwent became the battleground where two great forces would clash. The Anglo-Saxons, anticipating the Viking assault, had already set up defenses, preparing for the worst. And when the Viking army arrived, they charged with ferocity, seeking to overwhelm the Anglo-Saxon forces. The bridge was narrow, and the Vikings, accustomed to open fields and large-scale warfare, could not use their strength and numbers to their advantage. Instead, they were forced to fight in tight quarters, with nowhere to retreat. Yet their fury was unmatched. They fought with everything they had, their battle cries echoing across the cold morning air. Every step they took seemed to bring them closer to victory. But the Anglo-Saxons would not yield. They held their ground, forming a defensive line that held firm against the Viking onslaught. The battle was fierce, blood spilling from both sides as the clash of steel and the cries of warriors filled the air. The ground beneath their feet was soaked with the blood of the fallen. In the midst of this chaos stood King Harold II, his eyes cold and determined. His warriors fought with desperation, knowing that the fate of England rested on the outcome of this single battle. But as the Vikings began to retreat, their hope for victory faded. Yet the battle was far from over. Harald Hardrada himself entered the fray, fighting with the skill and experience of a man who had seen it all. His sword gleamed in the mist, and his presence on the battlefield was like a storm descending upon the earth. The battle raged on, and as Hardrada fell, his life extinguished on the bloodied soil of Stamford Bridge. The last of the Viking invaders were wiped out. The Anglo-Saxons had won, but the cost of their victory was staggering. Thousands lay dead, and the land itself seemed to mourn the loss. As the last echoes of battle faded, it became clear that this victory, though hard won, was not the end of England's troubles. For soon in the same year of 1066, an even greater threat would appear on the horizon. The Normans, led by William the Conqueror, were preparing to launch their invasion. The bloodshed at Stamford Bridge had only been the prelude to an even more catastrophic conflict. England would never be the same. The lessons learned on that bloody bridge of courage, sacrifice, and the price of war would echo through the ages. And the Battle of Stamford Bridge would be remembered not just as a moment in history, but as a warning. War is never truly over until the last breath is taken, and even victory can be a fleeting, fragile thing. And so the story of Stamford Bridge, the story of the last Viking, came to an end. But the winds of war had not yet ceased.